We learned in this episode that loneliness looks different for everyone, but it's something we all experience. Listen as we explore what loneliness looks like, both in active addiction and in recovery. We dig into why we feel lonely, even when we aren't alone, how being alone differs from solitude, and how important it is to be authentic, even if you want to stop feeling lonely.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
Don't forget, there's all kinds of bonus information in the show notes. We share bios of our guests, links so you can get in touch with them, and links for other resources we think you'll find helpful. You can find the full show notes for each episode at our website, throughtheglassrecovery.com.
All right. So we are here today with Scott, Rachael, and Coryn. It is so nice to see all of you and have this opportunity to chat. I'm really excited about today. So as always, we're going to start with introductions. We're going to start with Scott. How are you today?
I am great, Julie. Thank you and Steve for having me on here. Very excited. I am 8 months sober as of 2 days ago.
Awesome.
The best streak I've ever put together, and it's one that hopefully will not quit. So thanks.
Yeah, really cool. So tell us, you are the Sober Heathen. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Sober Heathen. I have a podcast. That's what I do right now. I am on all social media at that same name. You can find me anywhere. The podcast has been great. People from all over the U.S. and even the world now, London, Ireland. It's been a really cool experience. So yeah, anybody that want to check it out, it'd be much appreciated.
Right on.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that I include all of your links in the show notes so people can find you everywhere that you are. And next we will go with Rachael.
Hi, everybody. I am Rachael. I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm really excited to share that I think I'm about a month and a half shy of 6 years.
All right.
So, yeah, it's cool. This is like for real, like the real deal. Like I can get 90 days. I can get 2 weeks. But I usually don't get, I think I even had 6 months once. I might have had like a year and a half with a lot of cheating in there. But this one is like 6 years of like real deal, working a program, being honest, like doing all the steps and helping others. So I'm really, really proud of that because Lord knows, I'm sure we all share, I can get 3 days. 3 days felt like 6 years. And now I'm like, I'm looking behind and like, oh my gosh, dude, 3 days felt like 6 years. And now 6 years feels like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild. But I love recovery. I created a new page. It's called Addicts with Purpose. And I created that page almost this time last year as I was in this little weird bit of depression. And I don't recommend this. When you're depressed, don't just say up and move and leave your whole entire life behind you. But that's what I did because depression told me everybody hated me, which wasn't true. But it's been the most beautiful experience. And that's where I created this page, was to document my life when I moved from Utah. I moved across the country all on a whim of faith, like uprooting my kids. And I'm like, we're just going. And we went to New York and then we ended up in Tennessee. And so that's what this page was originally created for, just to kind of document my journey, show motivation, addiction awareness, stigma, just anything to help the newcomer or help those in recovery. And it's been it's grown really fast and been really fun.
Really cool. Yeah, we found Rachael through Facebook, and I just love the content that you put out. It is so full of hope and encouragement. So I love what you're doing, and so grateful for all of you that are willing to put yourselves out there and try to help end that stigma and the shame that so many people in recovery face. So thank you so much for being so honest and vulnerable and making yourself available like that. We really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And last but not least is Coryn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Coryn. I am 688 days sober. I'm just shy of my 2 years, so I'm pretty stoked on that. And I'm a full-time CPA. I am an auditor, and I originally found my community with the I Am Sober app. So that's actually how I know Steve and Julie is from the I Am Sober app. And it's been extremely helpful for me in my sobriety. And I'm in sunny Palm Springs, California. So I think I'm on the other side from most of you. It's already, I think it was 97 degrees when I looked outside. So yeah, just enjoying being sober, grateful waking up today without a hangover, every day that I'm able to open my eyes on a Saturday and be able to realize that I'm not going to have to deal with the crippling anxiety and bodily effects of drinking the night before is a great day to me.
Sure is.
Absolutely. And Coryn is a very dear friend of ours, so it is an absolute honor to have you on the podcast finally.
Thank you both.
So for our topic, I'm pretty sure most of us have heard the acronym HALT in recovery. And it, of course, refers to asking yourself if you might be hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, especially if you're experiencing a craving. As time goes on, it gets easier and easier to deal with each of those. But I think for a lot of us, loneliness seems to be the one that holds on, that can stay hard to deal with for a really long time. Our lives change when we get sober, and the ways we used to combat loneliness, if we ever felt it, have changed. So what role has loneliness played in your recovery, and what ways have you found to overcome that?
HALT was a big thing in treatment, absolutely, and that's something that we talked about quite a bit. And so when I got the question, I sat and I thought about it. It was like, I'm not lonely. The definition is sadness because one has no friends or company. And I have friends and I have company. I have good people in my life. But I can tell you this, something that I've been really working on, and it's loneliness in itself. It's, putting it bluntly, I guess it could be mommy and daddy issues. I was raised by my great grandmother. And up until last summer, I was working my ass off. It's hard to get my mom sober as I was for myself, which is probably why it didn't stick for me up until 8 months ago. So, there's a loneliness of not having that connection. I mean, she was never there, but for whatever reason, I wanted that connection, have that mom and dad, you know what I mean? So as I meditated on it last night, I really started to see that I was extremely lonely growing up because I didn't have that parental figure to talk to and ask those questions. The great grandmother, she did the best she could, but it was always, well, just don't think about it. Just don't think about this. So I quit going there because I was just trying not to think about it. And you know what helped me not think about it? A lot? Alcohol.
Oh, yeah. Good guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That really helped not think about things. So, so for me, the loneliness was the lack of that, that adult, that parental figure that I could go to and really get that advice and maybe that tough love even.
How about it, Rachael?
So loneliness played a huge part, more so in my active addiction because I was lonely and the drugs and the alcohol became my best friend. And I mean, there was isolating, there was all these bad people, and like you feel so alone when you're with a bunch of shitbags who are always like robbing you and stealing from you, and everybody's sleeping with each other, and it's like, wait, we're not supposed to do that, So like I always felt so alone, but really it all like after years of treatment and work, it was because I always felt alone because I didn't love myself, and I hated the person I saw in the mirror, and I wasn't comfortable in my own skin, and I hated everybody else around me, but I kept surrounding myself with all these other people who were also really freaking miserable. When I found recovery, they have that term, we're going to love you until you love yourself. Mm-hmm. And people wouldn't allow me to be lonely. I'm like, leave me alone. I'm trying to get myself here. Like, I'm sick, my shit stinks. Don't you know what I've done? Like, who's that person? Screw you. And I started to learn very quickly, like, you don't have to be alone. And there's a difference, between being lonely and alone. And I learned, like, I don't have to look. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, and loneliness was lack of love. And that's where my whole message now is, like, to spread love, is because that's where, for me, my ultimate loneliness was. I hated everything just about me. I mean, it's nice to have friends, but you gotta have good friends, like, to fill that void. Bad friends don't make you feel any better. But it played a huge part in both ways, I guess I could say.
I think that was something I didn't realize until I got sober, was you can feel very lonely and not be alone. So I have spent a good portion of my life surrounded by people, but those people never really filled that void. So I didn't understand that the whole time I was drinking, the whole time I was in active addiction, I was very lonely. And I don't know that I could have identified that or called it that, because I was always surrounded with people. Well, of course, if I have people here, I'm not alone, so I shouldn't be lonely. And I was drinking away those feelings, not even understanding what they were. And so when I got sober and I started making real connections with people on a real, authentic, vulnerable, meaningful level, then it became glaringly obvious how empty those relationships were, the previous relationships, and how lonely I really was. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. I think that a lot of people who are probably in active addiction or who are just in the very beginning of recovery might not even recognize that they are lonely if they're surrounded by people. I can be at home surrounded by my whole family and still feel very lonely.
You have, I'm listening to you talk, and I got a couple of pictures in my head. One of them is that feeling of being alone, even though you have people around you that tell you that they love you. I've felt that. I felt alone in that environment. And then there's can you picture yourself going to a party? There's a room full of people, 20, 30 people, right? I know from my own experience, I've walked into parties like that and I've been sitting all by myself. There is full of people. I am not alone, but it is very lonely inside of that. That is something I need to own. I am not putting myself in a place to be seen. I am expecting other people to see me. I need to own that part. Like there's been a lot of times where I've just sat there quietly and I haven't made the effort to be seen, to break that loneliness. But that requires me to be authentic. That requires me to show up. That requires me to do and risk rejection and risk a whole bunch of things to not feel alone, not feel lonely. And I think that's one of the hardest parts is when I'm in active addiction, I'm not being authentic at all. So regardless of whether I do show up or not, I am literally forcing myself internally to be alone because I'm being fake somewhere else.
Yeah.
I just had a whole swirl of thoughts go through my head. I'm going to try to put into words really quick. So I think for me, if I went somewhere where there was a big group of people and I felt really alone, I would internalize that as there is something wrong with me that is making me feel this way. And then that would turn into that whole shame cycle of what's wrong with me? I am flawed. These people don't like me, all of that stuff. And I've come to realize that a lot of times the other people there aren't capable of that level of connection. So that actually takes me back to what Scott was talking about with parents and with your great grandmother, where sometimes, even if you are putting yourself out there, even if you are being authentic and you are being vulnerable, there are people that just aren't going to be able to give you that kind of connection that will make you feel less lonely. That is a new thing that I'm just understanding, that it's not always me.
Right.
I can be reaching out, trying to get connection. Like you were saying, Scott, asking your great grandma, and she would kind of blow you off and tell you not to think about it. There have been so many people in my life that have, even when I have really tried to do that vulnerable thing, that just aren't capable of meeting me there. And that's not necessarily because there's something wrong with me. It's just that not everybody is capable, or not everybody wants the kind of connection that I need to feel less alone or less lonely.
And that brings, Julie, what you're saying, I'm going to piggyback off of that, is that one of the things that I heard actually in marital therapy that really helped me kind of change my mind frame is that I'm not asking for too much. I'm just asking the wrong person. So for me in sobriety, I've had to really learn that there are certain people in my life, again, like friends and family, that will tell me, you know, they love me, they're there for me, whatever I need. But depending on what I'm going through, I had to learn myself and sit back and think, okay, for this circumstance, who could I reach out to right now that I will feel heard, that I will feel seen, that I will feel like they can relate to me and give me the type of support that I need. Because sometimes being distracted is great. Sometimes I just want somebody to send me cat memes and tell me silly stuff, you know, and help me get out of my mucky muck of, you know, being so serious about something. But then also sometimes too, I need someone who, like Steve, that I can ugly cry with. And I can really say, like, hey, like this, you know, show him my bruises and go, hey, help me work through this. You know, so there's all kinds of different support. And I think for me, the biggest part was learning that it's okay to ask for what you need. But you have to sometimes figure out what it is you need first to know who the audience is to help you the best with that. So, and again, going back to the original question of loneliness and sobriety, I mean, I was very lonely in my marriage, and I was very lonely in active addiction. And I was in a very false, high-end, white-collar, lots of money industry all the time, where you show up and you're presentable and you put on the fake smile, and you know, from the outside, it looks like you have your entire life together. And in the inside, you're just, for me, it was not the fulfillment that my soul was craving. So in sobriety, I think the biggest thing that I learned, you know, in the beginning, it was like, well, I'm strong. I could do this. I could do this on my own. And the longer that I got through it, like, yes, I could do it on my own. I could white knuckle it, but it was very lonely. So learning the different ways to connect with different communities. And I think the biggest thing too is, like, you know, I've never been to AA, but I completely understand the model of the sponsor, having the person with the accountability and the person you check in with, because I think sometimes when you're having those bad thoughts about yourself, it's very easy to go, well, I just don't want to show anybody this part because it's, you know, it's ugly, it's embarrassing. But having the sponsor who's checking in with you, even if it's not, again, like with the AA model, it's built into that. But, you know, for me, it's been Steve for a long time. Steve, I call him my sober coach. And Steve literally checks in on me every single day. And some days it's just, you know, a hi, how are you? But then other days it's like, I got this big thing. Like, I really need this. And I would not have reached out. The previous me would have just gone, okay, these things are unsightly. I'm just going to go into myself. I'm just going to disappear and hide away. But because of that, I think it's really important that finding even just a sober buddy, some type of accountability, and I think it'll change over time. And realizing that too, in the very beginning of sobriety, it just don't drink. Literally do anything but drink. Like, you know, for me, it's been gummy candy. I'm like mainlining jelly beans, like whatever it is. Just don't drink, you know? And then I think over time, you know, you get to a point where you need to have different nourishment and different healing tools. And it's important to look into that, see what you need.
It's interesting, like the whole theme. Everyone's saying the same thing a little bit differently. And I hear like loneliness is a lack of emotional reciprocal connection, whether it's with someone else or even with yourself. I think that goes both ways, because one's isolation and the other one is just, I'm alone and I'm okay because I'm emotionally healthy and I have that part going for me. I might need that solitude. Boom. That's the word I was looking for. There's healing in both of those. the opposite is healing. And then when we get into recovery, we get into a whole bunch of people that are doing the same thing. They're healing. And we get to share that healing with each other. It takes vulnerability, I think, for me anyways, to not feel alone. I have to show myself and allow me to be seen, and without wearing the mask. And I know the mask shows up. It's going to. Life is going to make me put that on, even if it feels icky sometimes, and then I get to come back and reflect on it. But when I do that, I literally abandon myself, and that just puts me in that state of loneliness. I like literally do it to myself.
But sometimes it's necessary, though.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you need to do that to protect yourself from further damage. And you should not be so accessible to people who have the potential to hurt you.
This is where boundaries come in.
Yeah, and that's something I had to really learn too, is that don't let my need for connection or my loneliness, the same thing, don't let it make me reach for a drink, and don't let it make me open doors that I have intentionally closed. Mm-hmm. There are some, you have the right to eliminate toxic people from your life, even if they're family members. And I have to repeat that to myself constantly, because there would be easy connection. There would be easy people that I know would be accessible to me, but it's like junk food. Like they're gonna satisfy that initial need for, I'm lonely now, I need somebody. But then in the long run, I'm going to be kicking myself that I opened that door back up that I intentionally shut.
I think, man, a lot of great stuff already, and we're only just a few minutes in. I think the loneliness with yourself is huge. I grew up, the plan was baseball. I had a full ride. I had tried out for the White Sox and the Pirates. That was going to be it. And then I got to college and my anxiety kicked in, and I left halfway through the second day of orientation. And so I lost myself from there. And then I found coaching, and then, wow, that filled the void. This is who I am now, and then I got married and I had kids, and the wife said, yeah, you can't coach anymore. You got to be around help with these kids. And so then I lost that part of me. And so what filled that void was alcohol, but there was still that loneliness of like lack of identity. I was walking around in this shell and I had no idea who this person was supposed to be. And, so I think that was a different kind of loneliness, maybe, that I wasn't able to put into perspective until we just started talking here. And I think the other thing that was great that needs to be repeated is that advice you got in that counseling. You're not asking too much; you're just asking the wrong person. I think that's phenomenal. I mean, you not everybody can give you what you need on every single topic, and I agree. AA is great. I've been through it, and having a sponsor is great, but that sponsor isn't inhuman and able to handle everything. That's why I absolutely believe it needs to be a group effort. You know what I mean? And wow, just great stuff.
You're on mute, Rachael.
I know. I'm like, where did it go? So two things. So Steve, you had said one thing that I was like, oh my gosh, that's one of like the key things in recovery. So I'm going to say that, and then I want to piggyback again off of what Coryn had said. You had said, I think something along the lines that made me say opposite of addiction is connection. Mm-hmm. But like learning who can handle what you need is like, that's a big deal. Yeah. Like I sometimes have to, like, I get in my little phases and I'll have to call like 10 different people and tell the same exact story until that one person is like, oh, okay. Oh, you're going to hear me. And we have to learn exactly who to do that. But, and I can't remember exactly what you had said before, Steve, but like the opposite of our whole everything is that connection. And when we're in that dark, deep phase of loneliness, we're so disconnected with who we are, with actual human people. You don't even know where you're at anymore. And it just gets this ugly cycle going of like just disconnect in general. So like the connection alone is so important, but finding that person who actually can like hear you and see you, if you call somebody else who's in their own shithole, like they're not going to be able to help you through that. It's just going to create more trauma, really. So I could go off on all of these different I'm a talker for hours, but I already love this. This is like good combo, you guys.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm listening to you talk, and I think we say the opposite of addiction is connection. And I think connection is absolutely key, because I think without connection, we're not going to get growth. And I really think the more and more I get into this, the opposite of addiction is growth, and connection is required for that to happen.
Yes.
So I think it's really growth. I think it's, and Scott said it too perfect, and I think it's growth, and I think there's that loneliness and the lack of identity, and that growth is discovery, is discovering that piece of identity, the piece that you lost. Scott, you talked about, coaching and all of that stuff, and that's what recovery is. This is like one big giant maze of figuring yourself out and figuring out life and how to do that and not feel lonely anymore and find those people. And it is really a really amazingly wonderful thing. Really it is. And you're going to find, and I know I've found a lot of the wrong people to put the right information to. And all that does is leave me feel emptier and lonelier and rejected, and a lot of the things, it's really uncomfortable until I find somebody that I can share my uncomfortable with. And when I do that, when I have a home for it, God, does it ever feel less lonely? That is, for the longest time, I felt like, I could be a burden to someone when I'm sharing my problem, but all I'm doing when I do that is I'm allowing someone to show me love.
Yeah.
And if I don't do that, and I close that door and I put up the wall and I leave it put up to everyone, I just put myself back in the same place I started.
I'm going to jump off of that a little bit and kind of repeat what you said. Actually, something that I think a lot of people worry about is feeling like a burden. When they are in a place of loneliness, when they're in a place of struggle, they don't want to reach out because they don't want to dump all their junk on someone else. And the thing that helped me when I was feeling that way, someone asked me, how would you feel if I reached out to you because I was lonely and I was having a hard time? And I mean, the answer there is I would be absolutely honored. If there was anything I could do to help that person or support that person or just show up and even, listen and reflect and accept them and be a friend, I would be absolutely honored. And I think it's important that we remember that that's how other people are going to feel if we reach out to them too. I don't know anybody who would be like, oh my God, really? Look, we all, especially people in recovery, just really want to be able to show up for other people because, God, we understand what that is like. And then the other thing that you just said about growth. So that made me realize that the people that I feel the least lonely with are the people who are on a similar growth plane as the one that I am on. Those are the people that I feel like I really have a connection with. And there are some people that just simply are not on that plane. And that's okay. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me. That just means we are headed different directions. We are on different planes, and that's okay. But it's also really important to be aware of that. I love that because I think growing together is like, that's real meaningful connection.
Isn't there a Brene Brown quote for that?
Probably. I'm sure there is. Yeah, God, now that you said that, I know there is because I've talked about it before. We can't go one podcast without talking about Brene Brown, I don't think.
It's not a bad thing. One thing too, Julie, that I thought about that made me think of you, and I think it's something that you and I have in common, especially as being people pleasers. Something that I had to really realize too, Steve, with you talking about the difference between solitude and being alone or loneliness is that I wish I could tell my younger self this. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. I think that for me, a lot of times I found a lot of identity with like people pleasing and event planning and doing these spending all this energy to put on parties and to do things that people really enjoyed, that would be a lot of work for me. And I was seeking this external validation and trying to prove myself and prove for love. And that is something that I realized, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I have to do it anymore. Doesn't mean I have to subscribe to that. I'm finding different ways to prove to myself that I'm worthy of love, that I'm worthy of attention, that I'm worthy to reach out to someone and say, hey, I need help, and receive the help that I need. And for me, that was a really big turning point, I think, in realizing what I needed and what I was missing from myself. To give myself what I needed to grow was not just to distract people with, look at what I can do. Look at all these things I can do. Look at, again, being high performing, high excelling, I love those accolades, and that I was trying to find that validation. But really, it's good because it got me a lot of places in my life, but I also need to do certain things to nourish me at a spiritual and emotional level that has nothing to do with what I can do for other people that, makes it look good or look perfect. And I feel like, Julie, a lot of times when we've talked, I remember the bake sale that you sent us all a picture of what you ended up doing. I don't know if you want to share that story. I think it's wonderful, but yeah, it's been important for me.
That's funny. No, I did. I like my version of the bake sale treats that I made was like a kind of a cop out, and everybody else was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That was just me and my perfectionism and people pleasing and everything, and just accepting a little bit less. What you said there about people pleasing, I think it's really important that we all acknowledge that, and I say we all as in all of us, our listeners, everybody in recovery, people pleasing will never make you feel less lonely. People pleasing is not going to cure loneliness ever.
External validation.
Yeah. No, like people pleasing, that could be its own podcast, right?
Yep.
and how harmful it is, because for years, even in recovery, like just as a good person who just wants to be kind and help the world, like people pleasing is my biggest default, which I'm working through and growing through, because I always thought as long as I was doing stuff to help other people, I was going to feel good. But you're like doing just what they want, and then they don't even appreciate it. Or they, you do this whole big thing to people please, and they just walk right past it and don't even acknowledge it. And then the whole news cycle starts to happen. But I love that you touched just on that. And I love that you touched on being spiritually fit, because when you're lacking, and whatever it is that keeps you spiritual, like I have my own thing, like I love God and Jesus, and I know not everybody loves that, and I'm okay with that. Like that's just what works for me. I tried Buddhism, I tried all these other things, it didn't work. But getting spiritually and emotionally fit, so I could be okay and sit in my feelings and know like it's just okay to not be okay. And I am worthy of all of these wonderful things, but I'm also like, I'm entitled to have bad days, and I can have bad days. Now, sitting in a bad funk for 5 months, that's a whole, that's extreme.
Yeah.
But a 2-3 day weekend stay in your bed gender, like, 'cause you just want to not be okay, that's okay too. But knowing you kind of start to, as you grow in your spirituality, whatever that looks like. It could be yoga or just your meditate, whatever it is, you start to learn your body, and it starts to tell you like, these are the things that you need to help you fulfill those things, so you don't go back to where you were. But that's like really getting in tune with who you are. And like, that's where recovery is, that's where growth, like you said, Steve, the growth is. Because before, if I was lonely or people pleasing, it didn't work, I just ran and hit, on a 25-day meth bender. And then I was like, what just happened? Why am I so miserable?
Yeah.
Why did that happen again? Why do I keep doing this? Banging my head on the wall, not again. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's all I have on that one, on that little rant.
No, I think I think connection is opposite of addiction. You got to have that connected feeling or whatever. But I think part of the growth, like Steve was talking about, is being able to recognize when you're doing things, you're not yourself to get those connections. Like I find myself constantly on social media, should I say this? Should I say this? I'm not saying anything offensive. Like I'm not being like political or anything like that could, It's just my feelings on something. Like when I first started out on doing the recovery stuff, I did everything I could not to say anything negative against AA because I respect it. I love it myself, and I didn't want to turn those people off. But then I found that I wasn't being true to myself, and so the connections that I was making was false because I was given the appearance that I'm thinking this way, and I think that was a different kind of lonely. You got all these people liking this, and retweeting you because you said this thing, but it doesn't feel right because it wasn't authentic. It wasn't really who you were. So I think part of the growth is realizing that, to be yourself and finding those connections that work to take care of that loneliness for sure.
Yeah. If you show up in a situation and you're not completely true to yourself and people like you, and you're getting either just that affirmation or even having a great conversation with someone, it's not going to make you feel seen and heard and understood because it's not really you. And that can be really hard. But you can surround yourself with people and really be trying to show up. But yeah, if it's not the real you, that's those friendships or that time spent with those people isn't going to feel, it's not going to make you feel better. It's not going to make you feel good about yourself. It's just going to make you realize you're really good at acting or being what other people want you to be and meeting other people's expectations, which is not a soul-filling way to be.
Right. That's the difference between fitting in and belonging. If you're trying to fit in, it is very lonely. When you belong, it is very fulfilling.
Well, and Julie, to go off of something that you said, with connecting with people that are in the growth pattern or in the growth trajectory, I find that those other people that are working on themselves, those connections can be very nourishing for me. We have a friend that is a motorcycle person who works for a commercial airline company, and he's an engineer. And I know that I could go to that person with almost anything and get a very nourishing response from him. Even though he's somebody that in a million years, if I saw him in a room, I would never walk up to, we probably would never talk. He's somebody that I found that I could connect with. And I think that's something about finding your sober community, finding other people that can relate to you. And again, I'm not knocking. I bet I'm going to have family listening to this. I'm not knocking any of my family and friends that are trying authentically to be there for me. I really appreciate that. Just sometimes you need people who can meet you where you are and have been where you are to help reflect back to you more of what you need to hear in a specific way. So I think that's really good. Even if it is, again, find your community, even if it's AA, if it's Smart Recovery, if it's people at your CrossFit gym, if it's, volunteering at a local animal shelter, if you can find people that you can connect with and give you meaning and give you purpose, I highly, highly encourage to reach out, especially in early sobriety, and kind of find your tribe, find people that see you and hear you and can help you when you need it.
And it's a lot about keeping a very open mind because I've told Steve before, had I walked into a party and seen Steve there, I wouldn't have ever thought we'd have anything in common. Turns out he's my very best friend. And I think that we just have to keep that our minds open. We're so used to looking for people who fit our lifestyle or whatever it is that we're doing, that we have, those different commonalities. Sometimes the people that are on the same growth trajectory are people we would never expect to spend our time with and find the most meaningful connections with. And I think that's something that a lot of us in recovery have been blessed to just figure out, because we find ourselves thrown in communities of, alcohol is the great equalizer, right? So, we have friends who are bikers, and we have friends who are doctors, and we have friends who are lawyers, and everybody, because in the end, that's the one thing that we all have in common, is recovery. And it doesn't matter where you're coming from or who you are or what your past is. We're all headed in the same direction. We're all sharing this path together. And I think that the loneliness goes away once you find the other people that are just on that same path.
Yeah, I love that. I think I won't go on a tangent about that one because I could too. I just love to yabble, if that's even a word. But I I love, one of my favorite things about recovery is just what you guys have just talked on, is meeting all these different walks of life. That, like, you walk into a room of whatever kind of recovery meeting it is, and it could be just a recovery event, like a what do you call that thing that's in September and everybody gathers together, recovery month, and there's like an event with a bunch of people and tables, whatever it is. And you see all these people who you may have prejudged in the past, and you look at them and you're like, they're all your best friends. You know, like you said, like, you've got your biker person, you got a doctor who you would have never felt comfortable talking to, because, like, why would they want to know me? And that becomes your best friend. And the person who was living literally in 10 cities for 7 years, that if they were on a subway, you would be like, get in a different car because the whole car stinks. You know what I mean? And they become our people.
Yeah.
On our people, because you understand them, you comprehend what they're saying, and it's like, holy crap, I might not have done the same things you did, but I did the same things you did. You know, like, I didn't have to necessarily live in a homeless shelter for, I don't know, 5 years, but I did the exact same things you did, you know, and that's where my addiction led me. And that's what I love so much about recoveries. Like, there's so many different walks of life that you get to put all those things behind you. Because I sit with some people and I'm just like, we would have never been friends because I'm prejudging. And they're like the greatest things in the whole entire world.
Yeah.
Now I look at people all tattooed and bearded up and whatever. And years ago, I would have been like, my kids are walking in the room. Y'all stay over there. We'll be over here.
Yep.
You know? And now I'm one of them. You know what I mean? It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think those are like key, huge factors of, because I think a lot of people, like, they don't want to go, and I don't do the rooms myself. Like, I've done all different types of programs, but people are so afraid to walk into any type of a room, right? Whatever, it could be smart recovery, rehab, IOP, 12 steps, anything, because we're so afraid that the people in there are not going to like us. And we're like, they're going to judge me. They're going to think I'm a shitbag. They're going to think I was terrible because I left my children. It's like, oh, you did too? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, you do? Oh.
Yeah,
and that I love.
It's a whole room of me too. And it's also, I think I'm going to wrap it up here too.
Yeah. Me too. Just kidding.
Yeah. See, exactly. So, like, it's a whole room of me too. We all realize that we're a reflection of each other in one way or another. Like Julie says, it's the great equalizer. We talked about, HALT, and today we've focused on the lonely part, and everyone had really awesome things to say. Spreading love allows others to be authentic and be themselves. And I think when we show up, and a lot of us here show up publicly and show that love, then you're giving someone else an opportunity to show up for themselves and allow themselves to be seen. And when we do that, I think some really beautiful things happen, and that takes away some of that loneliness. Coryn, you said, I'm not asking for too much. I'm just asking the wrong person. I think that is super key. Choosing our people, I think, is the key word there. Choosing our people, the people that give us a safe environment to show up for ourselves, and then we allow them to show up for us too. Loneliness, the lack of identity. We touched on a lot of like really, really cool things. And the opposite of addiction is connection and growth. And I think when we're talking about this, I think I have to say meaningful connection. Yeah. That's where the authenticity part comes in to that. And then we get that amazing reflection back and forth. And last but not least, you are only ever alone if you never let anyone in.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you, Scott. Thank you, Rachael. Thank you, Coryn, for your time and your thoughts today. Really appreciate you guys.
You guys are all amazing. I look forward to connecting more.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Since we talked so much about community and connection in this episode, and we know how hard it can be to find those people that just get you and what you're going through, we want to remind you that we do host a small weekly meeting where lots of people just like you hang out to talk about life, share their stories, get advice, and just connect. We would love to have you join us. Visit our website at throughtheglassrecovery.com to get more information about our weekly get-togethers. And don't forget to subscribe, follow our podcast so you don't miss next week's episode when we hang out with some guys and talk about how we deal with anger. I'll see you next week.